When I go into an appointment with somebody, I'm as much interviewing them as they are me, because I want to see if I want to live with this person or not. And we've all had those clients that we knew they were going to be a pain in the ass, and we took it anyway. When you could be exerting that energy on good people or playing pickleball or doing something that is going to drive the business that you truly want. We looked at the one building we're in and we bought it.
Yep.
And this is when George found out I was a felon. When I pick him up, I am in soccer shorts, no shoes, no shirt, and I am pulled out of my truck in front of the movie theater, thrown on the ground, handcuffed, FBI, ATF, everybody is there.
All right, welcome back to The Inspection Period. We're a new podcast by State Media. And as always, I'm your co-host, Justin.
I'm Lindsay.
And I am George, guys. And each and every week, we're bringing you our takes on the latest news, talking to guests in leadership across all kinds of industries, and discussing what we've all learned along the way about ourselves, our world, and each other. This week, I am super excited for this guest. Yeah, I know. It's like giddy little schoolboy over here. We got Mr. Steve Valentine. Not only has he been a longtime friend, business partner, in many different ventures. I don't even think we have time to go into all the things, but Mr. Steve Valentine, real estate strategist, which I think is a perfect explanation of who he is and what he does. Entrepreneur, investor. He coaches other agents to be great investors. Actually, some of the agents on my team coach directly with Steve. Provides a wealth of knowledge. Over 20 years of experience. Yes, 30 years old and 20 years of experience. Pretty awesome. He's fanatical about handcrafting and the right strategy. I think this is like his superpower is like he's got this absurdly effective toolbox of techniques to figure out the perfect strategy for each and every client. And it's something in the toolbox that I dip into and ask Steve, I'm like, hey man, what's the best strategies here? So super amazing strategist. He's also not shy about his experiences, like the vulnerability of, almost being bankrupt and then bringing that back from the brink of that bankruptcy and building a multi-million-dollar business, selling thousands of homes. We've been in it a long time together, scrapping it out together. Super excited. Also, like in this vulnerability and through all this, his wife's been right alongside him. Amazing, badass, boss lady chick, Wendy Valentine,
Wendy.
General contractor, right? Drives a bigger truck than I do. Amazing woman that can handle just about anything. And all while raising two amazing humans, teenage sons, Chase and Christian. Just all around, just this great story of overcoming adversity, being a great strategist along the way, great business person, and above all, good friend, man. So welcome, Mr. Valentine.
I'm going to take George on the road with me to open up on stage. Thank you.
I got you, buddy.
Awesome.
What's interesting too, though, Justin, Lindsay, myself, we all know you through different avenues, man.
Totally.
There's like this 1-2 degree of Steve Valentine, I think, to just about everybody in the AZ real estate
Everyone knows
world.
The monster truck. If you guys don't know, Steve owns an actual monster truck. So
he does. That I think that leads to it was parked at the office for a good 3 months. I don't know, something.
What George didn't know, there was a homeless guy sleeping in it for a while.
But the good philanthropist Steve, he let it happen and probably helped the guy find another place to live. He strategized with him to get him in the home too. So,
he actually lives at Steve's house now.
Yeah.
So
he's not sure where. Man. He hasn't seen him in months, but he's somewhere.
He's outdoor knocking.
So
finding your next deal. Yeah.
So Steve, what we like to do on this podcast, man, is one of the frameworks I've used a lot of times in my presentation and throughout, kind of different interviews and things that we have is we go head, heart, and hands. Right. And so the head being what's going on today? What's going on in your head today? Heart, let's hear about some of the vulnerability. Let's get into some of the meat of it. And then the hand side of it is let's get to a tactical approach. What can the people listening, what can they implement in their business? What can they be doing in their life? Not just business, man. I think the cool thing here is we're just trying to share as much as we possibly can to help people improve all around, right? And so Justin, he's our head guy, man. And so we're going to kick it over to him. And
That's how I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. On that part, the first selfish question I want to know is like, how did you get buff so fast? Because like I'm trying to do that right now, and you went from like, I don't know, I haven't seen the gym in a while to just ripped in like 6 months.
Jacked.
So explain that to me, and I'm going to take a lot of notes right now. So
Okay, I'm going to give you the heart part first, if you guys are okay with that. Because this will
Right.
set the stage for everything else that we talk about. And it's going to go with George. Like, I'm completely vulnerable and I'm okay with this. And I think it's really important for our industry to hear this. Justin, to answer your question, where I'm at with my health is that last 2 years ago, my wife and I are on the verge of divorce. It was not good. What the outside looked like was fine, but inside everything was a struggle. And we had split up for about 3 months, and we were coming back together, and we decided to do 75 hard together. And that was like me trying to find clarity and stop drinking at the time. And I completed it. She did not. But it was a good path to finding my consistency in the gym. And it was kind of my insulin. So that 75 days went, and I opened the bottle back up, and we were still working on our marriage, and I had moved back home and going through those things. But it wasn't until some very hard conversations in September, which happened on the anniversary of my dad's death, which he's a big impact and influence in my life. And Wendy and I got in a massive fight that weekend, and I left home, and I made a really, really hard choice to go commit myself to rehab. And I spent 30 days in October, not just going to rehab, but like I made the choice so that I could heal my family, heal my business, and all the things and the negative impact I've had on people, and mostly myself. But here's the cool thing. It's really hard for us in a really busy season of our life to just go give up your email, your phone, and walk away for 30 days and go work on yourself. So I did that in October, and it changed everything in my life. And it's been 8 months this week that I've been clean and alcohol free. And it was the biggest impact on everything mentally going forward. And my health has been a derivative of that, because that is my focus right now, is being the absolute healthiest I've ever been, both physically and mentally. And what's happened is the way I show up and the way I can speak confidence in where my health is, and it's just impacted everything in my life. So I learned in that experience. I went in, and it wasn't so much about the alcohol. It was the things that I was covering up and trying to work through. And it actually, what happened was, me being the strategist and the reputation that I have, I was taking on everybody else's problems. And at night I would drink to quiet those problems, because the next day I'd wake up with anxiety and try to fix everything for everybody, but I wasn't fixing myself. And so when I looked in during rehab, I did 14 therapy sessions a week for 4 weeks, group and private. And what I found was I have something in the addiction cycle, which is very big in our family, was hero syndrome, which also leads to ego. It also leads to isolation of not talking to anybody about the stuff that you're going through. Because when you're the hero and you have the reputation, who do you admit you have problems to that is not going to judge you, not do business with you, or just kick you to the curb? So that I realized was, this is where I need to go, and I need to go internal and work on myself. And the coolest thing is I went internal. Wendy went internal last year, and we just agreed to walk down the same road together, working on ourselves and finding our own happiness until we could come down and walk that road together. And so, that's really the heart piece of this, Justin, and that's where the muscles came from. There's no weird stuff. It just all was mental and focus. And I work out 7 days a week, play a lot of pickleball, and I make sure that it's a priority, because it's very, very healthy for me to be in that spot.
Dude, thanks for that. First of all, I love that you jumped into the deep end right away, because that's what we're hoping for on this. And that's one of the reasons why you came up, is man, who should be in the first 10 episodes of this thing, or wherever this lands. You were one of the first people out of our mouths, because your vulnerability to sharing your story, and our hope of part of this podcast is to show that it's not just your real estate tactics, business strategy, all that stuff that builds. That's almost the fruit of what the underlying thing is at the end of the day. And it's your health, and it's your mental composition and home base. I've been in places as well in my life where marriage is super rocky, and it just kind of unstabilizes everything in your life. Everything falls to pieces when that happens. So as your friend, dude, super freaking proud of you for going through that, because it's a hard decision to make, especially 30 days. And you were right in the middle, right, of like a transition in your business, going from like sort of doing this coaching thing to getting back to selling houses again and building a rental portfolio. And you just liquidated a bunch of properties that weren't above a certain, like, where are you at in that process with everything right now?
Yeah, it's actually been fascinating that, we all get really busy and buried in this business. Like over the last 7 years, we've all been head down, and we've rarely taken a minute to pause and take a deep breath and look around and go, what am I doing and why am I doing it? And is this bringing me joy at this point in time? And I think it's important in this business, 25 years in the business, we've all seen, especially in my business, I've evolved 6 or 7 times through different markets. And I've never just done the same thing. I've always looked at the market and tried to figure out, like, what can I do to help more people and it bring joy? And so when I paused through this, and it's interesting because the first tattoo I got when I came out of rehab was pause, identify, respond. And there's a pause button tattooed on my wrist for the very reason of I can touch it. And it's caused me to pause in a lot of situations and figure out how I'm feeling and then respond to it, rather than what we typically do is react to stuff. Yeah. So for the last 7 years, I've just been in reaction mode, right? Chasing squirrels, what's this? And I chose, when I came out of that place, to just sit quietly. We had, by the grace of God, you go back to the strategy things, which you guys have all heard me preach to the real estate community. You guys need to be investing in assets as you're earning more income, not buying more shit. Oh, sorry. I don't know. Are we allowed to cuss on this thing? Sorry.
Yes.
I'll be careful.
More,
they can bleep
more
me out.
Actually, more of it.
Right. So the important part was, when I had this piece of my life, I had the financial wherewithal to sit back and pause and go, okay, I invested in some assets. I can take this right now. I can take this time. So I was grateful for that learning lesson in my life, because it really helped us through the last 6 months. And what happened was, it all became clear in April after a meeting where I'm like, you know what? I love coaching agents. I love mentoring. I love that piece. And I also love the business itself. And I want to take it to a new level, but I don't want people to pay me to coach them. So, and I also want to have more partners. I have not done or been able to do anywhere near what George has been able to do with growing this massive team of people. It makes my head turn and my stomach sick every time I think about what George's been able to accomplish with that. And I've always admired George for that. But I've also realized I'm not George. And I love George, but I don't want to be George, right? And so I got through it, and I'm like, okay, if I take this piece and I go through and I start to build my network at Real, and I start to coach these agents to being successful, I actually figured out how to build a team and a brokerage that I'm not necessarily liable for or responsible for, but they're partnering with me on different visions and different folders and different things that I'm trying to do, which is helping them succeed. And then we took our existing database, and I loved this when it came out. I'm like, you know what? We were at our VIP party. We had about 300 people in the backyard. I'm like, this is my community, not my database. And I quickly changed to, my database of all these clients is my community, and I need to stop separating everybody as a database and start engaging everybody and sharing with them other clients' wins, because it's kind of fascinating at a VIP party when we have 300 people there. This was our 10th year. When you see your clients start connecting and doing business with each other and different things come out of it, it's pretty fascinating. But I think a lot of us in this industry are afraid to put all of our clients in one room as to what are they going to talk about? And the reality is, it's a lot of fun to watch what happens.
Dude, that's that's such a good quote. It's not your database, it's your community, because that's the way that you've just organically, I've always told people, you know what, my favorite thing about Steve is that there's only one version of Steve. So like, Steve is Steve at all times, but genuine engagement of people is like is a superpower of yours, right? So you communicating with your database, but like more so as your community and creating events and being thoughtful about that. I mean, that's naturally, organically how you've built things so far. And that's why I love that term, real estate strategist. Like, instead of like, I'm not a real estate agent, I'm a real estate investor, although you got a portfolio of like, I don't know, 80 plus homes, something like that, but you chose real estate strategist. Like, can you unpack that a little bit? Why you like that title?
What we've been taught in the industry is to focus on two main goals: transactional and GCI. And when my dad died, I'm looking at things and going, okay, thanks for these plastic trophies that I got from Realty Executives for years for being top performer. I'm like, I'm still broke and I don't have any money in my bank, but I've got these cool awards. So who am I really? And what does this really look like? And is the focus in the wrong place? And so when I started thinking about every seller, every buyer, there's variables to everything. Everybody has different situations. So rather than walking in the door with my agenda when somebody says, I want to sell my house or I'm thinking about it, I typically show up with zero presentation and build a rapport and lay out, here are some options, but not until after I ask a lot of questions as to where they want to be, how they want to get there, and what does their future look like as well. Because there's been a lot of clients that I've talked out of selling their home into keeping their home. And then they're coming back going, oh my God, if we didn't do this, we would be broke or we wouldn't be able to make this next move had we not listened to the advice and both the pros and cons of keeping this. And I'll give you a great example is that, 3 years ago, we have these great friends. She actually moved out here from Texas, lived with us for a little while, worked for us. Then she was getting married and we're all playing dominoes at the house. And they're like, we're thinking about buying a house. And I get them qualified and they buy a house in like 48 hours. We get them to keep that house. And then we sell them one of our off-market deals that Wendy renovated. They kept that house and moved to Texas. Now they have 2 rental properties that are cash flowing $1,500 a month that have $300,000 in equity, and they're buying their next house in Texas. And she's a preschool teacher and he's a solar engineer. But just the life-changing piece for them, both of their kids have free and clear college funds if they want it out of those houses. Yeah. And it just, when you get to do that for people and see them win, I made money when I sold them the houses, and I'm sure that I'll sell it down the road, but it was what is in their best interest in that capacity. So it's the variables that people don't understand. And you take that buyer and then we go in reverse with a seller. And it's like, the strategist piece comes out when somebody owns a free and clear property. When you start to say, okay, if you sell this, what do you do with the money? How are you going to make it grow? And can we reverse that? Can I buy the house with your money and pay you interest on it? Can I help you reinvest that money into the systems that we do in our business? Because this is how we help families. And it's kind of fascinating how we've been able to take the community and the people and not just have buyers and sellers, but when the sellers sell, they're also bringing money back in, they're reinvesting into other things, and they're helping us make a larger impact. And the great part about that is when you explain to somebody their investment into your company and the amount of families that you're helping, it's a feel-good investment that's secured by real estate that is growing for them, and they get to see the fruits of their investment.
Dude, and that's like, when we were in Beverly Hills not too long ago. Well, I say not too long ago. It's probably like 3 years ago at this point. Feels like yesterday. Yep. I remember us talking about some of this while we were there, and you were in the middle of writing your book that's out now, which is incredible, Limitless Real Estate. You can get into that in a second. But my favorite thing is that you're like a realtor's realtor, like how therapists have their kind of therapists that like the specialized therapists that are there to deal with therapists. You are like a realtor's realtor where you got a lot of real estate agents that are real good at selling houses and finding deals and doing all of that, but not so great at coming up with strategies to create financially free futures for them and their families and figure out how to not be, 90 years old sitting in an open house in 120 degree heat, That's one of my favorite things about you is that your clientele is not just, it's not just like people with no real estate license that are normally buying houses utilizing a real estate agent, your real estate investment strategist kind of title around that is, if you're a real estate agent listening to this and you got questions about creating any kind of portfolio for yourself, I'd swear up and down that Steve is your guy to chat with. Like, he's your guy. And you have all these very creative even people that have been like in our mastermind. I know Melissa and those guys are like so pumped about their home that they finally bought, their dream home in the mountains, and you help them figure out, because of a coaching business, figure out how to make that a part-time, have the business reimburse them for some of their expenses and get all of that to a place where it's actually manageable and it's making them money, opposed to being something that they have to worry about as their dream home, so. Yeah. Well, dude, thanks so much for all of that. I could keep going. There's more stuff about like your real estate portfolio and all of that good stuff. But as far as your like book is concerned, like, what's the best way for people to grab that, since we're on the topic right now?
Actually, it's interesting you bring that up, because I love that Lindsay is on here, because almost a year to the date, we did our book releases. So mine was actually a year ago tomorrow.
Yeah.
That I did the book release, and it's called Limitless Real Estate Strategies, and it's on Amazon.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, make sure if you got questions about it, it's a good intro to Steve's way of thinking about things. And then if you want more help from that, like, go ahead and reach out to Steve. We'll figure out how to put that in the show notes. So that concludes the head section for me, because I could just keep going. We're 20 minutes into this thing and we haven't.
You guys are doing great. I was just going to let it roll.
Lindsay, go for it.
Yeah. So I'm going to take over. We're going to dig a little bit deeper. You started off by going vulnerable, which is very true to who you are and who I know about you, Steve. I think they've touched on a lot of different things. But I want to kind of go down the parenting route. Your kids have lived with you through a lot of different variations of you. And I think that one of the things that I think that you, at least from the outside, have done really well is navigate those relationships with your boys with a level of transparency and authenticity that I don't think that you traditionally see in parenting. So kind of take me back to like, your and Wendy's parenting style and how you have been able to iterate your life and continue to grow and change and give yourself permission to, fail and dust yourself off, but then get back into it, and how you've navigated that with your kids.
Oh, good question. It's not been easy. I mean, look, I'm a parent. George, Justin, you guys are parents. Like, the parenting isn't easy, especially in this day and age.
What's that old saying? Like, I was a good parent until I had kids. I was a good parent too until I had kids. Basically, like
So
all
true.
these like idealized ways of parenting. You're like, oh, that sounds really great, and then you have children. You're like, oh, yeah, some of this doesn't work.
I think one of the big things that Wendy and I were really on the same page about. I mean, earlier on, I had a temper, but it wasn't towards the kids. I just, younger 25, 27-year-old, because we had the boys when I was 25 and she was 30. We just had the conversation based on the way both of us were raised, is to not do fear-based parenting, which is if you don't do this, this is what's going to happen, or I'm going to beat your ass, or any of those things. And we decided to use one of the tactics when they were young was not tell them no, but ask them, are they prepared for the consequences of what they're doing? So if you're going to jump on the couch, just know if you break your arm, I'm going to laugh at you, rather than just telling them no constantly, right?
And you would actually laugh at them.
I totally would, and then I take them to the hospital. The point being was, when we have little kids, or as they get older, they're trained no, rather than having them critically think through what they're doing. So even now, when the kids are teenagers, like, hey, we're going to go TP so-and-so's house. I'm like, you know what the consequences are, right? Okay, cool. Don't call me. Right?
I'll bet you're out of jail, maybe.
We have to, as parents, and even today, my parents didn't have a lot of money, neither did Wendy's. And not that we have a ton of money, but obviously their lives are better now. And you have to find the balance of not making them entitled and also responsible, contributing human beings. And there's a balance in that. And so when we left that relationship open with the kids, our house was always safe zone. They could bring any stray kid home they wanted to. And there were nights that we had 20 kids there. And the point is the kids all knew it was a safe spot. And there was never any guilt or shame or judgment in them when they screwed up. They knew they could come in the door and have the conversation, admit what happened, and ask for critical thinking. And so we always just had these relationships with them to create that human being or that adult person that we enjoyed. And so being vulnerable with them, we've been a vulnerable household our entire time. And it's, my drinking stuff, they knew about, we talked about our marriage problems. We had lots of conversations with the boys about it. We just never wanted to have a household where there was a lot of guilt and shame for screwing things up, because that's the household that I lived in, was in fear and guilt and shame about everything. So those have always been the open house. And what happens with that is that, when they start doing things like doing edibles or smoking pot or drinking, it's not this thing they're getting away with anymore. They do it at home if they do it. And by the way, it doesn't bother me because it's not their story. I had the problem. So, that was one things we navigated through. It's like, it's not their story. So they have to make their own choices. And I'm not going to get irritated at Christian when he has a beer because it's not his story. So that's the way that we kind of engaged with our kids. And we were always open and honest, especially about money. This is the one thing that drives me crazy about parents, no matter what position you're in, is never tell your kids that you can't afford it, because that mentality sinks in and it makes them think they're broke and they're poor. But you can tell them, hey, it's not in the budget this month. And how do we put it in the budget for next month? What do we want to sacrifice for whatever that thing is? So there was a lot of conversations about money and involving in things all the way down to vacations. The first time we took a cruise, it was 15 months away, and we sat down with them. They helped us with the vacation, and we told them how much it was going to be. Even though we could write the check, we made them consciously aware for 18 months, if we didn't go out to eat, it was money towards the cruise. So they got to see the saving and sacrificing for things that they wanted, which has been a huge lesson for them in their teens now. And it's kind of funny. They both still live at home, but they never ask for money. They both have good jobs, and they're flourishing right now. And it's a result of all those open conversations. And look, we had them. We had a knockdown drag out with Christian on Saturday night. And now it's even more fun to navigate through because Christian is working for me in the media department for the last 8 weeks, which has been awesome. It's a lot of fun having him around. So I hope that answers the question around how we raise the boys.
Yeah, I think you have a unique relationship with them. It shows, I obviously know you on a personal level. Steve is one of my dearest friends and a very close colleague. He coached me in this business. He's been an inspiration for a lot of different things. But I think, another one of the things that I think you give a lot of people permission to stay in their own lane and really be themselves. Maybe you were earlier in your career, but at least since I've known you, it doesn't really feel like you get sucked into some of the expectations of what it means to be a real estate agent or realtor. Some of that like selling sunset, I gotta drive this car or wear this or do this on social media. You've really been able to do something that is really true to yourself. How have you been able to kind of buck the expectations of what it means to be a real estate agent and what that looks like from the outside? Because obviously we know you've got tattoos, you've got a beard, you're jacked. You
monster
sometimes
truck,
drive a monster car.
One of 70 cars.
Yeah, like how do you stay in your own lane and just not get sucked into because I think a lot of people fall in that trap of like feeling like they have to be or look or do a certain thing and then build their business a certain way that optically looks one way to the outside, but you've just not done that. How have you done that?
It was one of the things I learned not to do from my dad. So my dad always believed in this business that you should be a chameleon. So if your client smoked, you should smoke with them. If they cussed, you match their energy, right? So you're matching back and forth, or you're dressing based on the appointment. And I just chose, after my dad and I split our partnership, that I wanted to be genuine. And how I show up on online is how you're going to see me in public. You're not going to get two different versions. And I felt like when I was working for my dad, there was two different versions of me. So when I showed up for a client, it was one way, and then I was out and about, it was a different way. And I'm like, this kind of sucks. So I'm just going to be me and stop worrying about what everybody else is doing and just go in that direction. And, sure, have I maybe lost some relationships with people because they don't totally approve of me? Sure. I don't take it personally. It's okay. I'm not everybody's cup of tea. And that's okay. Right? It's just like, I'm not a luxury agent. I'm the first person to tell you that. I suck at that part of the business. It's not that I suck at it. It's just I don't want to do it. Part of the reason is because I can make way more money on a $200,000 house than I can a $3 million house in a lot less time. So
yeah, that makes sense.
I've just found that just being genuine, who I am, it just makes all the difference. And the funny thing is like, most people think that you have to show up in a suit and tie to talk to people about investing in these things. And the reality is most of my investors wear jean shorts and flannels, and they're old guys and they don't give a crap. They would rather not see me in any of that stuff. They just want me to be real. And the other piece too, which has been awesome, is I've learned to genuinely connect with people, not sell people. The one piece of advice I would tell people, if you're trying to do more business in your community, those things, just show up and be a human. Don't show up and be a realtor. I learned to not do that from my dad too, because every swim meet I showed up at, my dad would show up thinking it was a sales meeting, like, who can I get business out of my kid's swim team? And it's kind of fascinating. I love playing pickleball in Munns Park with like 75 people on Saturday morning. Every now and again, George is down there. But I've connected with all these people on a personal level, and they see my energy and my goofiness on the pickleball court. And I've created hundreds of thousands of dollars in business from the pickleball court.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. I think your ability to close the gap between who you are on the inside and who you are on the outside, closing that gap between what people see and who you really are, is really one of your superpowers for sure.
Thank you.
I love the term. Have you heard of it's friends with professional benefits? So it's just really prioritizing the friendship first, right? And you are such a true example of putting relationships above business. In fact, one of my favorite experiences with Steve is I invited him into my personal community with my past clients and my sphere to do an investment workshop. I'm an investor, but Steve's my investment coach. So who better to coach my community than bringing another person who specializes in that? Most people wouldn't put another realtor in front of their clients, but one of the things about Steve is that you really can trust him in your community, and he's a true partner in my community. And I think because we both know that Steve's clients are Steve's and mine are mine, and there's probably not going to be a ton of overlap between somebody who wants me and somebody who wants you. But I think that's been, it's just really a testament to who you are and the type of collaboration, not only with your community, but within our industry, that you're willing to do things like that and really break those barriers and provide value to people outside of your own community.
Yeah. And Steve, one thing that's interesting about this, going back at that whole, not my database, my community situation keeps going back, but you being real and honest and genuine just around the people that you're doing business with. Do you think that has contributed to you being able to do just business with people that you enjoy and you get along with, right? Opposed to having to do business with people that you just, maybe don't get along. I'd hate to say don't like, but let's be honest. We've all had clients where it's like, oh God, I'm trapped in the car with who today? But you primarily do business with just people that you enjoy being around, which is, do you think that your genuineness has kind of given way to your database being your community?
I love that question, and here's why. When I learned this the hard way, but the easy way. So when my dad passed and I had to break down his brokerage, he was all investment heavy, and it was all investors from Canada and around the country, and he did all the trustee sale. My dad had one whale that bought 500 homes that just said he was going to take care of my dad for his retirement if he kept his fees low and all these things. My dad died, and I told this guy, like, I'm not working for the prices that my dad worked for you for, because he was a pain in the ass. Mm-hmm. He gave my mom and I 2 middle fingers, and he did not honor any of his agreements with my dad. And that was the last time that I was going to let that happen in my life. And I said, you know what? From here on out, when I meet with an investor or a client, they just hear this one phrase, which is, I will work with you, but I do not work for you. And we are going to have a team effort, and you're going to invest in my services and my guidance. But if we're not going to be on the same page, I'm out, because we're not doing this pissing contest. We're not going back and forth. There's things that I can't control in this market. I can only do the things that I can control. And we have to be on that same page. And the other thing with the investor was, my goal is that, hey, we both have to make money on this, not just you making money, because I'm not going to work for free. And my dad was working a lot for free in the hopes of what this guy was going to pay out at the end. And what I learned from my dad was, if that's the agreement, then put it in writing. Because what should have happened, if that was, which is awesome, and if you guys listen to this, like, take notes, if my dad had taken a 2% equity stake in every one of those houses, at the end would have been worth $10 million to my mom after he passed, that guy would have been on the hook for no matter what. So there's some things that I've added into our business that if somebody's going to go down on price some things, I'm going to take an equity seat in their position there, so that down the road I can reclaim some money if I need to. So sometimes people are looking at the cost out right now, and if you can help them out by maybe taking an equity position and do that, this is just another way to do it. But that's really where it came from, Justin, is just being genuine and going, when I go into an appointment with somebody, I'm as much interviewing them as they are me, because I want to see if I want to live with this person or not. And if I don't, it's nothing personal. It's just hey, I don't think we're a good fit, but I've got a referral for you if you'd like to talk to this person, and set them up for success. Not be a jerk about it, but just say, we're not a good fit. Because what I don't want to do is waste good energy towards bad people. And it sucks the life out of us. And we've all had those clients that we knew they were going to be a pain in the ass, and we took it anyway for whatever reason.
Every red flag going off, and you're like, nah, it'll be different this time. Nope.
They're yellowish, pinkish flags.
Yeah. Is that, you think, Steve, that's like seasons of your career too? Like, you know, as an early, I was more willing to take on that pain in the ass client, or
I think we all have those stories, because
and then you do it too many times. You have to, right? Like, give me everything, give me anything. So if I'm a brand new agent, or if I don't have anything in the pipeline, like, yeah, you got to deal with that sometimes. But like, at some point, your business can shift, right? That you build a community, you build that tribe big enough. It starts becoming the people you want to work with.
You're right. Here's my question though. If you're a new agent and you're like, oh, I've got this one seller, and they call and text you every day at 6 a.m. going, why isn't my house sold? What are you doing today? When you could be exerting that energy on good people, or playing pickleball, or doing something that is going to drive the business that you truly want. And instead, we get desperate and we're like, yep, I'm going to take this person on because a sign in the yard, it controls the market. And trust me, George, I did it. Yeah, and you're right. There's going to come a time that you're willing and and I think here's the intention, George. As long as that agent knows, like, this is going to be a pain and I'm okay with it, and there's boundaries that can be put in place and expectations, then go for it. But if you're going in like a marriage and you're thinking that you're going to marry this guy and change him, do not, because it's not going to happen. They're going to end up whittling you down and driving you crazy and wasting your money on top of it.
Steve, what are some of your gatekeeping questions to really identify if somebody is going to be good? This is a little tactical, but like, if they're a good fit for you, are there particular questions that you always ask people when you're working with them to figure out if they're a good fit for you?
I think the first indication is if they start to tell me about how they want to do something and they're not listening to the advice that I'm giving them, that's my first indication that we're probably going to butt heads on certain things. And the first indication, it's kind of like when we all talk about agents. The first person that wants to discount or ask me for a discount, it's probably not going in the right direction because we haven't even talked about the value that's being put in or the strategies. So when somebody starts out like, will you list my house for 1%? I'm like, probably not going to work, but I'm happy to have a strategy session with you to explain to you what the value is of what we do. So those are some of the qualifying things that I kind of look for in those conversations. And it, like on listings, how realistic are they on price for what they think is there? So it's kind of going through, trying to think of a great example. Last year I did this, right? I took a listing I shouldn't have in Munns, and there was too many verbal nice guy conversations, and all of it was agreed to just verbally, and the guy totally hosed me at the end of it. And I just learned from that. I'm like, you know what? No more deals like this without things in writing. And any conversation we have, it's like a change order on a construction site. Here's what we talked about. Here's the things. Please approve this, and we're moving on. And I actually added a really cool tool to my repertoire this week for that crap. Otter AI. I've been recording all my phone conversations, and it transcribes it into notes and shoving it into Follow Up Boss.
Yep.
And it's like, here it is. Here's the notes. Here's the transcription. I'll send it to the client. They have record of it. And now we're moving on. I don't even have to regurgitate anything.
Yeah, I started using Fireflies, and so that works on Zoom calls, but you can also start it when you're in a meeting, and it's been game changer for me too, just to get like things in writing. And then there's a record of it.
Yeah.
I think one of the
Shiloh's
biggest lessons.
Really good one.
Shiloh. Yes, we'll have to talk about that at some point.
Yeah.
I do think there's a lot of good tools, though. Get it in writing is what I'm hearing from you on that one. So last kind of a question I want to dive into in the heart is like, now you've been sober 8 months, and what does that look like moving forward? Like, what are some of the tools that you're using, either from mindset or, heart set that are keeping you in that space? And, is that a long-term thing for you? What's the trajectory of how you're going to manage that going forward?
What's fascinating about that is Tammy, our CFO, she is constantly impressed that, 8 months into this, I can still go hang out at the bar, go have meetings with clients, hang out at the country club, which is a known place for me to drink during the summer. And it doesn't bother me. And here's why, is because I know that opening that back up, who I was before, and it's not who I am now. So it just doesn't have any place in my life. And my boundaries have really been put in place. And I loved it when I was there. It was the one thing they talked about, when you decide to go to rehab or get sober, everybody's like, well, how many AA meetings are you going to? And I remember one guy, he's like, I get up every morning, I make my bed, I go to 5 AA meetings, and then I'm like, do you work? Is there any other point to life besides being sober? And some people have to live in that space. And I'm like, God, it sounds like you're trading one addiction for the next. And so mine has been several things. And they taught us there to find your own insulin, what works. Me, it's my morning routine, it's the gym, and it's the relationships that I have with people that are very, very tight. I met some great guys there. I still go back there once a week for a weekly meeting just with the guys that have come out of it. And it's been great to pour back into those guys and get some wisdom from them. And then, I just have different groups of core people that are no bullshit. So everything, all the cards are on the table, and everybody has permission to call shit out. And so it's been one of those things where being vulnerable and talking about this and sharing with people and going, hey, here's where I'm at. You know it. You can call me out on something. And that has been the best thing for me when it comes down to this. And when I look at that vision, the amount of agents and clients that I really want to impact, there's just no place for it right now because my brain gets foggy. And I've realized like over the last couple of weeks, my brain is clicking and I'm working harder. But here's the deal. I also sat down with Tammy and Wendy last week, and I'm like, ladies, my brain's moving, and I want to make sure you guys aren't seeing any weird tendencies that led me to doing all the drinking before. So I'm being very consciously aware of it and letting them know this is where I'm at. I know it looks like I'm working 14 hours a day, but I'm consciously aware of where I'm at in my head. And I don't feel this need to go drown myself somewhere, right? It's been great. And yeah, there's no place for it right now. I can't say never. And I'm also not living the one day at a time. I just am in the mindset of I just don't drink anymore, right? And I don't like going through I've been sober and all these other things. I just don't drink anymore. And it's just been a great piece of my life that I'm really proud of.
Well, I'm really proud of you too, having been on this journey with you for the last 3-ish years. I'm very proud of you, and I know that you are an inspiration to me and to many other people. So I appreciate you and
thank you.
Vulnerable to share all of that with us.
Yeah, great stuff, Steve. Definitely proud of you, man. I think I think we can let's share some stories, honestly. I think that might be some of the best stuff.
Yes, please.
Like for like young business owners, young or even agents, entrepreneurs, investors like in this world that are like, what do I do? And how'd you get here? We've been in this journey a while together. REO days, if you guys don't know, like foreclosure days when 90% of the listings on the MLS were bank-owned properties. Steve and I were two of the primary listing agents in Arizona. We drank our way through that market. I sleeping on futons in the office. Like Steve, those days we're carrying these listings, and there's also this like being a good human, because these are real people losing their homes to foreclosure. We're having to talk to those homeowners. We're working through like those days, man. Like, what was your business like? How were you functioning day to day at that point?
God, there wasn't any time to breathe or sleep. And the hard part about it was if you screwed something up, this one nugget that you had could be taken away in 2 seconds. Yeah. Right? Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, like they would kill you.
Some of the worst, clients to have now. Yes. They wouldn't have passed our litmus test now today. No. But yeah, they were tough clients for sure.
I think I learned in those days, George, that again, relationships, and you did the same. The better the relationship you had with the asset managers, the more lenience you had, the more assets you got. So you learn to really like service them, because they were trying to make their goals every month and you were trying to move mountains for everybody. And there was a lot of heart in that business. I mean, we probably knocked on 500 doors that people opened up or like, I've been paying the rent to the landlord. Yep. And I'm like, sorry. And in the beginning, Fannie and Freddie, it wasn't until the end did they have a rent program or any of this other stuff. It took them so long to do it. So, it was constantly figuring out the systems, and you just had a process and a procedure. And George, I don't know what the max was you had, but there was at one point in time during the height of it, probably 2010, where any given month we had between 100 and 150 pending transactions and probably 100 new assets coming in the door. Yeah. And by the way, when you have 250 assets, every one of those houses had to have dated photos every week. You had to inspect them. You were paying people and
clean them up, right? Like you were,
and then
you filling in swimming pools in Arizona. Yeah. That's something that people,
yeah. And on top of it, we also had to manage our money in it, which was tough, right? So Wendy managed all of our financing because there was times we'd have $300,000-$400,000 out in reimbursement, and if you didn't track it, Fannie Mae wasn't paying you back.
Yep.
They were like, "Sorry, that's on you. You didn't submit it right."
Yep. Submitted it wrong. Sorry. Yep. 8 months later, you might get paid. I'm curious, what was the size of the team then? Pretty heavy operational. Like, what did it look like at that point?
To be honest about that, it was me, 2 field agents, 1 transaction coordinator. That was it.
So you were literally probably sleeping at the office at that time.
Yeah.
You were.
Well, my office was at home, so I could walk upstairs and go to bed and come back down and start over.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those days was crazy. It's like we probably operated off of 4 or 5 hours of sleep. I certainly wasn't going to the gym. I wasn't eating right. We were just working. It was terrible.
exactly. I mean, once again, we were in it together because we were a lot of those, like, Fannie Mae would come to town, and that's how I got to know Steve was, in those small groups of agents that were together during that, and it was, I mean, your coping mechanism was drinking, and we didn't sleep a lot, we didn't work out hard, and we drank a lot, and you're getting yourself
And the
through.
vendors would just have these massive parties and just drink us onto the table all night.
Yeah. And so
I'll tell you one thing though, those days though, here's the crazy part about relationships. And I think that's the one part that's really important to a lot of agents, is to realize that the way I grew up with my dad, you didn't have camaraderie or collaboration with anybody else. It was all competition. And we all learned in those days to work with each other, figure things out. And it's actually, I always enjoy this story because it's the one thing that I will say that my dad left for both George and I, was when my mom had to move out of this building. I stopped by George's office to harass him, and he's sitting in like a 10 by 10 office, old school file cabinets. I couldn't even sit in front of his desk. I'm like, dude, we should just go buy a building. I was like a kid thinking we were going to build a tree house. We looked at the one building we're in and we bought it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And this is when George found out I was a felon.
Okay. Wait.
And
for those of you that don't know, they're literally next door to each other right now.
Yes,
they are next door in the building.
So
yes,
I'll give you my perspective on that story, right?
Oh,
so
I love it.
REO basically had shut off like a faucet, which we knew it would one day, right? Steve, we're now we have to go into this more traditional real estate model. We're very operationally heavy before that, and now it's like, okay, well, shoot, I got to lead generate, I got to build a CRM, I got to do this, and so we're both in that part of our business, like doing investments, we're buying rentals, we're doing these other things. We bought a few during the REO days. I think I left with like 25 or 30. You were probably around the same. And I wish we would have bought 500. Okay. Yeah. And so I'm sitting in this, Steve's not joking. I'm sitting in what's pretty much a closet. I've got a team of 8. And he comes in, and this is classic Steve, right? It's, hey, dude, what do you do? Like, let's go buy a building or something, man. I'm like, oof. Okay, ready, fire, aim. All right. So what do? We buy a 10,000 square foot building, and I go, holy shit, man! I gotta fill this thing. And you want to talk about a catalyst for why did you grow your business? Everybody's like, oh, I saw this great opportunity. I saw this. I'm like, I had to fill this freaking building to cover the rent. Honestly, to cover the SBA loan amount that we got approved for. I'm like, holy shit, I'm going to need more agents, man. I'm going to need more people. I'm going to lead generate more. And so that's when I went from 10 to 50. There was other opportunities, other things that fed along that. But as soon as we had the space, it created that. But Steve's not risk averse at all. And I'm very little risk averse. I'm like, yeah, because I know, because I think what I get from you, Steve, is there's no way, you're always willing to bet on yourself. Mm-hmm. Always willing to bet on yourself, man. And I would say for any young business owner out there, if you don't have that belief in yourself, man, it's going to be a long, hard road. Because I know there's no market that I can't succeed in. There's transactions in every market that's ever existed. There's no way we can't freaking figure it out, man. Do you believe that?
And figure it out together. And I think that's where the relationship aspect comes in, is to expand on that, George, is bet on yourself. And it's a lot easier to bet on yourself when you feel like you have these relationships that, you know what, one way or another, I can figure this out with somebody. Yep. And that's always been my go-to. I can't buy the building on my own. I don't want to take on that risk, but does it serve a purpose for both George and I to buy the building? And what can we do with it? And it's been a pretty kick-ass investment for both of us. I mean, it's home base for everything.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty commonplace wisdom, right? That self-confidence is always the precursor to success in all arenas of life. You see even golfers, they come out of college, they're incredible, they're amazing, they're better than anybody, but then they dive for a little while because they have to get the confidence that they can win at a new level. And then once they figure out how to win a new level, then they're one of the greatest to keep playing,
Yep.
It's the same thing in business, where if you when somebody latches on to that, oh no, like I believe that I will just figure it out. It's no matter what, I will figure it out. That's when you really have to watch like that. That's when you're going to watch somebody really take off. But getting there is a journey. It's a lot of black eyes and kicks in the stomach.
And what I heard from George, though, that I love this concept of we fill the container we give ourselves, right? So if you give yourself a really small container, you're going to fill it. But if you give yourself a big container, you go fill it.
Hey, this is not a license to go buy a G-Wagon for everybody that's
no.
right now.
Kind of
don't buy bullshit. Don't buy bullshit. Like I'm noted. Steve noted for saying the same thing too. Like I think a lot of agents get successful and they get excited about buying the next dumb thing. Where what's excited Steve, what's excited me is I will put $200,000 into a business idea. I'll put, Steve, we went and bought, this is on a whim again. I go, Steve, this was me approaching Steve about a strategy. I go, hey man, I got these sellers, a small secondary market outside of Flagstaff where Steve plays pickleball called Munns Park. I go, hey, I've got these sellers. They own the property free and clear. They have no idea what to do with the money. They don't have a strategy for, if we bought this property for $300,000, but they want reoccurring revenue. Right. And so is what I get from it, but I didn't really ask the like uncovering questions. And when I didn't know what to do, the guy I always called was Steve. I was like, tell me, man, like, what should we do here? And he's like, okay, well, let's go meet with him. Meet with him, end up like buying this cabin, hillside, and $300,000 property, really good terms for us as buyers, but great terms for the seller. I think we were paying like 7-8% on the money. We came in with a little bit of money down, and it was good. We got into a cabin. We wanted to get into a cabin up there, right? Now Steve's not happy ever with just like one investment. So
he doesn't want one cabin. Like, he wants half of Munns Park and then to be the president of Munns Park is what he wants. No, president.
So, but that was a good deal, right, Steve? Like, I mean, meeting with those sellers, that was a strategy most agents wouldn't think about when they go and meet with them.
George laughed when we walked out. He's like, "How did you do that?" And I'm like, "Do what?"
They signed the papers.
House was listed at 330 last week, and you took the commission off. And then you reduced it because they were going to have to reduce the price anyway. And we paid $262 for it with a full seller carry at 6%. Jeez. We closed on it in a week.
Yeah.
That is Steve Valentine magic right there.
And what's interesting too, is like the win-win for the seller. Those sellers are still clients of Steve's, and have reinvested with him that other capital, because eventually we obviously got him out of that cabin and the seller carry there. And so now they've reinvested that money into the next transaction, man. And it's that forethought on how do you create the next deal, the next evolution, and keep these people in your tribe too. Because I've been to some of your VIP parties, man, that is a tribe of people that are, and you treat them so stinking well. Like even before you could spend the money, that was something you always saw as like a sound investment, is the way that I took it. Right. Like I'm at your VIP party and I'm going, holy crap, man, how much did you spend on this thing? Right. Like you go all out, bro. Yep. Like they are no joke.
It's the taco truck for me.
Oh,
always the taco truck. Though.
The taco truck is always the game
and
changer.
Everybody still uses my taco card girl.
Yeah,
I know.
I do.
She's amazing.
Liz from the Taco Car Girl.
She's in my phone too.
It's called.
Yep.
Taco Car Liz. Yep. I love
she
it.
still won't do anything for free for me, even though I've referred to like 9,000 people. But I love her, and when I met
because she probably took your advice to heart. You literally just told everybody not to do that. So
yeah, when I met her, it was at a client's 40th birthday in New River, and I remember because I got hot sauce on my shirt. It was so good. And I called her for another party. This was 10 years ago. She had one cart. Today, she's got 15 carts and 10 vehicles. Yes. And we've had her go to San Diego for us. We've had her go to Munns for us. Like, she'll travel. You got to pay her. But it's just been awesome to see her succeed in this and be part of helping her along.
I want to backtrack a little bit here because I think it's a good story too. And people can learn from, like overcoming adversity. But when we bought this building, you mentioned, so we had a little bit of struggle getting SBA financing. Are you cool with sharing this story?
Oh, of course. I don't care.
Okay. And we go to like apply for everything, and it comes back like Steve has an unresolved felony on his record.
Oh, yeah, I just realized he mentioned that, and then we never went back.
We never went back. I'm like, let's go back. Yeah. So walk us through like these. I think this is also something where, you know, you can, if we could talk to our younger selves too, and we can all make mistakes, but how quickly do you come out of them? And it also doesn't define you. So I'm interested, like share with people what happened there.
So this story, this felony that I had was from when I was 18. And the dumbest thing I ever did in my life has followed me like all the way until recent. That stupid felony, just like, I don't know where. And so here's what happens. When I'm 18, this kid that I went to San Diego with came back. He left a bunch of counterfeit money in the back of my truck. It was also the reason I got my first tattoo, which I just covered up on my left arm, was my Pamela Anderson tribal art around my arm. And so we get home, and my little brother has figured he found the money in the back of my truck, and he's been spending it.
Oh, no.
I'm like, dude, that's fake. So me being 18, I'm like, well, what's it going to hurt? So he goes to the movie with his friends. I give him a $50 bill. He brings me the change. When I pick him up, I am in soccer shorts, no shoes, no shirt, and I am pulled out of my truck in front of the movie theater, thrown on the ground, handcuffed, FBI, ATF, everybody is there. My brother's 15, I'm 18. Now I'm in the back of a paddy wagon all night. Spent the night in jail. It all got resolved in court that I got community service, and once that community service, my $2,000 fine was paid, I got a misdemeanor, right? No big deal. It was supposed to be automated. Well, I paid my court fine, did all my things, I'm good. Nope. I got my real estate license, and you know that question that says, have you ever been convicted of a felony? I'm like, no, I haven't. But underneath it says, or been arrested for anything? I check no. Well, 25 years ago, the fingerprint card took a year for clearance. I get a cease and desist my first year in real estate for forging or lying on my application.
Oh, jeez.
So Cecil Daniels, who was an instructor back then, ends up being my neighbor and walks me through with DRE with Bob Bass, and I get a 30-day suspension. They reinstate my license. All is good. George's thing, this is where it comes up again. Fannie Mae almost doesn't let me back into the program because of my black mark on my record for my license. So Brandon Lawler calls me and says, hey, I don't think I can approve this because of this. And I'm like, dude, no, you don't understand. So I had to send him an explanation of the exact story I just sent you. And Brandon called and he laughed. He's like, I think I can get this through. But it made me nervous. We just left Realty Executives. We're like, we're going to go do our own thing. And now they're telling me no because of me. I get all the way fast forward to this SBA. My dad had died. My dad saved everything. There's a folder from 1996 of my court documents. And when this SBA thing was going on, I have to call George and tell him, dude, I'm sorry, this is what happened. And it screwed us for like 6 weeks. Tammy had an attorney. We took my dad's file. He walked it back through for $500. But 20 years later, it finally got removed.
That is wild story. How is this the first time I'm hearing this, Steve?
Well, it's not like I go around, look, I'm a felon.
Yeah. It's not really a thing he leads with, but yeah.
No, right? So
I just think it, like, you know, we've all done dumb shit like in our younger days, and we've learned from it, right? Like, it's something you think is not a big deal. And then also too, like I look back and maybe that's the question here, Steve, is like, you know, if you could look back at, obviously your 18-year-old self, you would say, don't use counterfeit money. But if you look back at maybe even your 35-year-old self, man, like what kind of advice, 25, 35-year-old self, like what kind of advice would you give that person? What advice would you give Steve?
Oh,
I know it's tough, man.
Slow
That's such
down.
a hard question. Yeah.
Slow down and be true to yourself and stop trying to be everybody else. Right? If you can slow down and really look inward and be who you are and figure out what your goals and dreams are. Because one of the things that's been really important as I've been talking to a lot of agents that are transitioning into real is I'm trying to meet agents where they are and what their goals are. And what I see in what I'm hearing from a lot of people is they're in these teams or these brokerages where they're feeling less than because they're not selling 50 homes a year. And they're not as important as the person that's selling 50, but they may only want to sell 12. And it's meeting where they're at and helping them get to that goal. And George, I know that you're a rock star with this, right? You meet your agents where they're at and help them increase their goals and those types of things. And I've always admired you for that. And it's something that I needed to learn, which is don't try to change people, but try to meet them where they're at and help them get to where they want to go rather than where you want to go.
Yeah. It's such good advice, man. It's like this, you know, at this point in life, I think we're in this group too, like all four of us, like working hard on ourselves, right? Like there's this like personal growth aspect to what we do. And I see that if I think looking back, that would be one of the things I would tell my younger self is like, when you say slow down, to me, that means like, hey man, like the hard work is not just in going out there and fighting for deals. The hard work is, you know, making that morning routine, maybe meditation, maybe it's, you know, realizing that the drinking was a coping mechanism earlier, right? Like how good could we have been had we recognized that earlier in life? I too, Stephen, inspired by you, my wife and I, you know, are on that sober journey as well.
Yeah.
About a year and a half in, and gosh, man, you want to talk about the clarity? You know, we did a lot of amazing things while we were, you know, well, I don't know, we weren't like heavy drinkers by any means, but like we'd like to have a good time, and but I'm like, how much more business what else could we have done, right? What else could we have done?
Dude, so, that is the thing. You know what's fascinating about that is having a conversation with Christian on Friday night on the way to Munns, and he's made some errors with his finance, and we let him. You know, 21-year-old kid with their first credit card, and they screw everything up. But there's no guilt and shame, and we all did it. But we're having the conversation, and I explained to my son, I'm like, dude, let me share something with you. I was good, but not great when I was drinking. You know, I was coherent during the day and doing all the things. It's not like I was drinking all day, just to put in perspective. But I wonder how much more money or increase or impact I could have had if I was clear during those years and I was truly had a one track focus. You know, it's I chase squirrels from coaching to investment deals to trying to do online courses and podcasts. I was laughing at myself this morning because I thought they were all down. I'm looking through my podcast reel. I'm like, oh, here's Real Estate Revolution. And then here's Thinking Outside the Box. And then here's my original purpose-driven podcast from like 7 years ago. I'm like, I don't even want to open that. I bet you it's terrible. But we learn to evolve. And, you know, talk about clarity, George. It's like, I told my wife this morning, I'm like, hey, I did an investment, 72% return on my money. She's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I bought a $5,000 lot in Arizona City from a probate sale, and I just sold it for $35,000 on a seller carry at 10%. She's like, what? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, those are the little things. And I bought that lot last year. I just didn't know what to do with it. I didn't want to build on it. So I just threw it on MLS. I'm like, huh, all right.
But also like, you know, you called it squirrels, man. I really think sometimes we got to, I call it like firing bullets too. Like, cause I don't know what is exactly going to work. And so in business, you've got to be testing things. You've got to be trying different things. You got to, and then you iterate on it. You continue to iterate. Yep. Like this is something that's obviously very prevalent in like the tech world, but I don't think like the real estate business, when you talk about strategy and you talk about scientific model, like method and like A/B testing things and all these things like Justin knows the world about, but like the average real estate agent isn't iterating on things, right? They're not maybe trying to like, okay, I'm going to test these 5 marketing calls to action. I'm going to test these 5 different ones and I'm going to figure out which one works the best. Right. And so we call it squirrel sometimes. I think it's like, hey man, we're trying to figure out what works the best. And when it does, we fire cannonballs. We're like, okay, that's the podcast message that works. That's what happens. Yeah.
The curiosity is interesting too, because I've been labeled as somebody that's just lucky, like, oh yeah, Justin stumbled into another thing again. Like, that's crazy. And it's not because I'm lucky. I think just curiosity creates a pretty large luck magnet ultimately. So there's a big difference though between like labeling distraction as curiosity, though, I think, which like what Steve was getting at, and there's like that middle road there, is figuring out how to test things. I personally need a filter for knowing if it's even worthwhile for me to test something. So I have my own internal one. But then after that, prop it up as fast as we can and fail as fast as we can, because if this thing's going to fail, I want it to fail in the next week,
soon.
Not 6 months from now. I want it to fail very soon, basically. So
yeah, you guys both bring up such great points that I've never looked at it that way. That that the previous 7 years, actually, Lindsay and I had a conversation about, what was it? The skin cells die every 7 years. And I felt like when I met with Chris in September, Chris Harder, who I'd been in his mastermind, huge influence in my life. When I told him I wasn't coming back and I was going to put that investment and I'm going to go do this rehab thing, I'm going to fix myself, this is what I need to do. That was actually 7 years, almost to the day that I joined his mastermind and met Chris. And it was like, not a death of that life, but I love what you said, George. It was a lot of experimenting over the last 7 years to finally figure out what truly brings me joy and now where I want to focus on and what my strengths are. And all of that was firing bullets to figure out what I didn't like, what I did like, and then going, okay, now I know all these things. Now I can really figure out what I want to do.
Focus and double down now. Yeah.
Yep.
I love that, man. I love the journey you're on, dude. Like, it's awesome. Great family, good friends, good human. So appreciate all that you're doing and doing for this industry too, man. Just a good fresh set of eyes that, you always know, like I said, the Steve you see is the Steve you get. And so that's you don't get that a lot, man. So love that, buddy. Appreciate you, man.
Can I add something to this?
Yeah.
I think when you go back to the newer agents, George, and you talk about firing bullets and things like that, one of the things that I would encourage everybody to really think about is the difference between struggle and grind. And grind is when you go to work and you hate your life and you can't wait for the clock to tick over so you can get the hell out of there. The struggle is like what you were talking about with testing the markets and the ideas and calls to action and figuring out what's worked. You're going through the struggle to get to something better. And if you can just work through that struggle, it's going to be better on the other side. But if you feel like it's a grind and you hate doing it, you got to figure out why that is and fix it. Because the struggle is, I got up at 4 this morning and I've got all these things and I got these different things that I got to get through. And some days it is a struggle, but I know what's on the other side of it. And it's just like struggling through not drinking at the beginning. I knew that there was something on the other side of it versus the first time I quit drinking a couple of years ago for 18 months. It was a grind because every time I went somewhere, I wanted to have a drink, but I was white knuckling it because I'd never done the work on myself. And so I would encourage anybody out there to really take a look right now and figure out if your day-to-day is a struggle to where you're going and what your goals are in mind, or if you're really grinding and you're not really liking what you're doing. And if you feel like it's a grind, you really need to pause, identify, and then respond. And this is my encouragement. I've met with a lot of agents, and I know that you guys do too. It's crazy where a lot of their mentalities are right now. And it's very low. They don't know what to do. And I've encouraged a lot of them. It's funny, nobody's taken me up on it. I've told 6 agents, I'm like, I need you to go to my cabin for 24 hours, no laptop, no phone. And I need you to read the book, Vivid Vision, and write, and then come back.
Yeah.
Because you're freaking unclear right now. and you're firing bullets all over the place, and you're not clear and focused. And so if we can focus that back in and figure out what your true goals are, then we can redefine where you want to go.
Dude,
so good.
That's really good. I've heard it said like working from inspiration, basically, not from like I have to, but I get to situations. Very
Right.
big flip. And what is that? Paul Graham, he's like the founder of VC, Y Combinator founder, said that like the crux to figuring out what you're going to do for the rest of your life is finding something that feels like play to you but work to everybody else. And if you can find that, doesn't matter how much money it makes on paper, you'll figure out how to build a successful life out of it, you know. And I love that
100%.
you've gone through that journey to find that for you, man. It's freaking cool.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve. We are so grateful that you joined us here on the inspection period. How can people connect with you? Where do you want people to find you?
Instagram, Steve D. Valentine, or website, valentinegroup.az.com. Lots of cool stuff on there, whether you're an agent or a consumer. And the agent stuff, most of my Instagram is all geared towards the agents, the crazy strategies, the dumb things we're doing, and the fun things we're doing that just will make you think of what's possible in the business. And, you know, I think there's a lot of us looking for that place in this, and the investment side is a lot of fun when you get to add that to your regular business. And it's not a replacement thing. It's not a one or the other. It's an addition which adds value to your clients because you have more strategies and more solutions for them.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to that. So we will make sure to include Steve's information in the show notes. So thank you all so much for tuning into this week's episode of The Inspection Period. Make sure you like, subscribe, and follow us on all your favorite podcasting platforms. And be sure to check out more from Estate Media on Instagram, LinkedIn, or YouTube.